What's going on, everyone? Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres with ScoopDuck on 3, coming to you on Wednesday, January 15th, 2025. Got some big news to get into today as we have a new Oregon commitment from the transfer portal. Believe that's commitment number 9 for Dan Lanning and the Ducks. And joining me to break it all down is ScoopDuck owner and publisher Justin Hopkins. How we doing, J-Hop?
Good, man. Just, sitting here another day where we're covering it. And now our second podcast of the week, getting us back on our routine. So I'm also equally excited about that.
No doubt. No doubt. I love doing these podcasts and getting to chat with you. When I did the last couple solo, I feel like I was kind of knocking some rust off, and you just have to basically have a conversation with yourself, and like just getting yourself to stop and like process things is honestly a really tough skill to master, but I'm working on it the best that I can. So let's get into the latest edition, the biggest news out there in the Oregon football world. Former USC interior offensive lineman Emmanuel Pregnon has committed to Oregon. This news coming out on Tuesday, with Pregnon choosing the Ducks over fellow finalists Tennessee and Texas. We know that the Ducks got him on campus, as did Texas. Believe the Ducks did that before Texas, however the timing kind of lines up there. But this is a huge addition, Justin. We know that the Ducks are losing a number of starters along their offensive line from the 2024 season. Josh Connolly Jr., Ajani Cornelius, both heading to the NFL. Marcus Harper as well. He exhausts his college eligibility. We'll see how he stacks up with some of the other guys in the draft pool. But Pregnon comes to Oregon, will come to Oregon with 1 season of eligibility remaining. He was one of the very top guys in the transfer portal. I'm looking at the On3 rankings. He was the number 11 interior offensive lineman, according to On3, but the On3 transfer portal industry ranking had him as the number 1 interior offensive lineman and the number 19 player in the portal. So huge addition up front for Alik Terry in Oregon.
Huge is exactly right on many levels, right? Huge in terms of the addition, being a position of need. And then secondly, in size, is a big dude, right? He's 6'5", 6'6", 300 pounds, 320 pounds. He's just a big, solid, strong dude. Really looking forward to see him work himself into the rotation at Oregon. And I did ask one of our USC friends down there how to say the last name, because I was curious, just like you. And it sounds like it's French, and it's supposed to be like Pregnon.
Pregnon, okay.
Yeah, I believe. But also, apparently, a lot of people just say Pregnon, and he doesn't really correct him or mind all that much. So, anyways, a big addition. Love the fact that, Oregon really solidified that offensive line group, which really had the biggest question marks going into this offseason. I suppose you could argue safety and secondary was right there with it, and I agree. But this is a guy that helps Oregon in a big way. Been a starter at USC, going to come in and more than likely earn a starting spot, but at the very least, we'll say he'll compete for time out there. And just really like the way they brought it together, the offensive line group together, that is. I know it's not ideal to bring in 3 offensive line transfers in a year and hoping that they can gel and start, but it beats the alternative of hoping and praying that some of your young guys that might not be ready yet can step up. So I would certainly take this option if those are my 2 choices.
And yeah, I think that's the big thing here, right, is that it helps you address a position of need. And it's interesting to discuss where that need comes from, because you're losing starters, obviously, but that's only half of the equation. You have to also turn your attention to who are the options, who are the guys on the roster that you have to choose from in a competition. And for me, let's just say hypothetically, Pregnon didn't come in. You have Dave Iuli and Kavika Rogers as your kind of next in line guys that probably have the most snaps under their belt. And then behind them, you're looking at some relatively unproven guys that we just haven't seen on the field a whole lot. You could also we should mention Matthew Bedford, the former Indiana transfer. It seems like, I don't think we've gotten confirmation, but it seems like he's probably going to be coming back for 1 more year, assuming that he can get that medical red shirt. I don't believe he crossed that 4-game threshold from this past season, Justin. So I just think as a staff, it makes sense if you're able to compete for the best players in the transfer portal, which Oregon clearly is. Pregnon has one more year of eligibility left and really seems like he found himself and kind of rounded into form out there in Los Angeles. So it's more than likely that he's going to be taking one of those starting guard spots. And even more important too, Justin, we can't gloss over the fact that Oregon's going to be breaking in a new quarterback in Dante Moore. So I don't think there's anyone smiling bigger than he is right now following this commitment.
Yeah, I think Mekhi Hughes, the running back that they got transferred in, and Dante Moore are both saying, yeah, I'll take this guy. I'd like to have him in front of me. So, and you're right. So far, just assuming that this one didn't work out, you would then be counting on Dave Iuli and Kavika Rogers to be the 2 guard spots. And you have a massive question mark behind them. Like you said, we don't know if Bedford's coming back for sure or not. Totally could. Has been injured. Not even sure what he fully brings to the table if he does come back. And I'm not picking on him. We just kind of don't know all the way. He was good 2 years ago, obviously injured most of this last season. So some question marks there. So now all of a sudden you add Emmanuel Pregnon and you feel better like, hey, nothing else, worst case, we've got more depth. We've got more bodies we can rotate. We've got guys that'll help us. I think he comes in and he's a starter. And I think you just rotate Iuli and Rogers between the 2 positions, kind of getting them, because these guys need breaks. You got to get these guys out and get them a blow here and there. So feel real good about that rotation, versus just putting those 2 guys, Kavika Rogers and Dave Iuli, out there, not knowing what you have. And, again, Danimal strikes on the transfer portal trail, like, broad everybody that is committed or everybody that is visited as a transfer has committed to Oregon in this particular cycle. So that makes them 9 for 9 and just cleaning house in terms of the guys that visited from the transfer portal. And, it's a big one. This is a guy that Tennessee wanted, Texas really wanted. And, for Oregon to kind of hang on there, I think at the end you would say, and get him signed is a big deal. And just love the way this brings the offensive line group together for sure.
And there's another thing that I think we definitely have to talk about here, Justin. Call it an elephant in the room if you want to. It's an overwhelming sentiment or a popular sentiment that is out there. Some of it comes from Oregon fans, but I think a lot of it is from other schools. And I think you know where I'm going here. You see Oregon addressing needs, filling in gaps with guys from the portal. And what are people saying? They're saying Oregon can't develop players, or Oregon keeps bringing in these transfer guys that are ultimately passing over the younger guys. And I think that if anything, there's more credence to that latter point than the first one, right? If we're looking at development, look at some guys in the NFL, Penei Sewell. I know that was before landing, but Penei Sewell, Jackson Powers Johnson, Josh Connerly was like the first signature landing recruit that they were able to beat out USC for in the class of 2022. He's a 3-and-done heading to the league. So that's huge. You and I both know Oregon develops players, but it seems like a lot of people don't see past that. But it is also interesting to see that some of these younger guys, and we were talking about it on the podcast earlier this week, I believe, you're kind of seeing that window of opportunity to prove yourself getting smaller because Oregon, or any school, not just Oregon, can go out and get a guy like an Emmanuel Pregnon in the transfer portal that's proven, ready to go right now, and we'll see the field. And that's just one of the realities that I think we have to come to terms with the transfer portal. But offensive line's a developmental position. You know it. I know it. You don't see a lot of guys that get on the field right away, let alone just early in their careers.
It's a lazy take from people that are at programs that aren't winning as many football games as Oregon is. So, I mean, you see Washington and USC fans notably picking about it. I'll offer this. There's 2 teams competing for a college football championship on Monday, and both of them are starting transfer quarterbacks, right? I mean, like, it's the game. Like, if you don't want to play the game, that's fine. If you want to sit back on your laurels and say, hey, we won 7 or 8 games, but it's all guys we developed. Good for you. Yay for you. We're going to, go ahead and watch Oregon win 13 games on guys that they did develop and then did recruit in the transfer portal. So I guess you could pick which side of that you want to be on. And yeah, I'm looking directly at you, USC and UW fans, because that's your argument. Yeah, hey, we develop guys. Well, did you really develop Caleb Williams, or did he transfer in the transfer portal? Yeah. Oh, by the way, USC has had more transfers incoming than Oregon has had in the last few years since Dan Lanning's arrived. I know. Don't let facts back up your argument. I know that's lazy, but here's the deal. Everybody's using the transfer portal, and the key is you're using it to get better, to make your team better, to fill holes, and that's exactly what Oregon's doing. Dan Lanning's now in a spot where he's using the transfer portal to fill in holes specifically, or if there's just a really good player that jumps in the transfer portal and they want to, make a move and take them. So, I mean, those are the two instances that Oregon is doing that. Washington's doing the very same thing. Their wide receiver room is in chaos. They went to the transfer portal to try and make it better. Obviously, there's the Jonte Cook saga with him leaving already, so it hasn't necessarily worked out. USC, their fans are pleading for Lincoln Riley to hit the transfer portal to fill spots at linebacker and DB and other positions on their roster because they are thin at those positions. So, don't be a hypocrite. Don't sit there and throw stones at Oregon because they can recruit the transfer portal better than your team can and compete for national championships and conference titles because that's the name of the game. I mean, that's just the name of that's college football, and you got to continue to adapt to die. And Dan Lanning's done it better than anybody right now, as good as anybody. How about that?
Sure. That's totally fair. And you lead it to a couple of interesting points too, just about development. If you get a guy for a year, can that school claim him? I don't know. Let us know in the comments, you guys, if you think 1 year is enough to claim that guy for your school or to claim that you developed him. I feel like a perfect example is Bo Nix, right? He came in as a all-world quarterback recruit out of high school over to Auburn. Things did not go well at Auburn. He had some really high highs and some pretty low lows, but he comes to Oregon and just completely revamps himself, reinvents himself as a quarterback, becomes a first-round pick, and is just crushing in the NFL right now. We might talk about him a little bit later today. But then the other thing that we have to talk about, Justin, with this edition of Pregnon, Oregon fans are happy, and it's good to see the staff addressing a need. But let's not kid ourselves. This doesn't mean that Oregon's automatically going to have another Joe Moore Award finalist offensive line, which essentially top 3 offensive line. It was them, Army, and somebody else. I can't remember. Texas, maybe. And we've seen them look at this past season, right? They had to break in new starters, and it was rough. So rough that they barely won 2 of their non-conference games against Idaho and Boise State. So while this is a great addition, I think you also have to bring that to the conversation that this is not going to be a perfect transition. I mean, I'm expecting that it's not going to be a perfect transition, but also Alik Terry's done it before now, right? I think that I've always been a huge fan of Terry and what he's been able to do, but he's really coached up this group and proven to be a major asset to this Oregon staff, and he'll have to do it again in 2025 as you break in some new starters.
It's going to be a work in progress. And so, I know you and I were talking about a few things before we got started recording here. And one of which was just that spring ball is going to be very intriguing this year because of so many new faces and so many new bodies. And it's going to be young guys getting a shot to prove that they're ready. It's going to be, some of these guys that have transferred in. It's only a handful of guys transferring in, but it's still, they're going to be counted on. And, you're breaking in a new quarterback. You're going to see at least one new running back. You're going to see a lot of new offensive linemen. You're going to see all new guys in the secondary for Oregon. So it'll be really interesting. And so that's the thing to me. We're going to come out of spring ball probably with some questions about this offensive line group. And, I'm going to guess this. I'm going to guess in the spring game that they may even break up this offensive line group in this actual spring game, because obviously we've got the 2 sides, maybe to not show, some of the warts that might exist on this offensive line. It's going to be a work in progress. You cannot expect these guys all to show up, say, in January and be gelled and ready to roll by the end of April. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's going to be a bad offensive line performance in the spring game. And the key there is that these guys continue to work together in the summer. They put in what we call the lonely work, right? The lonely work is when nobody's paying attention, when there's not a spring game on TV for everybody to watch, when the coaches aren't there to make sure they're showing up for workouts. These guys are there and doing it and getting those reps and just working together and building together. And I want to say this because Alik Terry deserves a ton of credit. Great coach, and he's doing a great job keeping these groups consistent year in and year out, even with new faces. But I'd be remiss, and I don't think it gets mentioned enough. Don't forget Mike Cavanaugh is on this staff and working with that offensive line group. That's a guy that would be an offensive line coach at probably 2/3 of the Big Ten conference schools right now today if he made his name available. Like, he's got the experience, he's got the resume. He's a fantastic offensive line football coach. And he's here at Oregon basically because he's got his grandkids living just up the road, and he wants to be close by to see them grow up. Like, that's his top priority in life right now. He's made his money. He's done his thing. He wants to stay in coaching a little bit, but be close to his family, his grandchildren, and his kids to be able to watch them grow up. It doesn't get much better than that. You're getting this dude because of that circumstance, and he's really good at what he does. So, yeah, I mean, between Alik Terry and Mike Cavanaugh, I know Dallas Warmack's in there working with those guys too. They got a really strong nucleus of coaches that are going to have their work cut out for them this year. But you've essentially got two offensive line coaches in that room today. And yes, Dallas Warmack is earning his chops. He's a guy that's played offensive line, is coming up through the coaching ranks. He's a third guy in there. So a lot of attention will go into this room. And that's a big reason why I think we've been able to see Oregon put in these pieces the last couple of years and still find a way to have at least continued success along the offensive line group. Don't sleep on Mike Cavanaugh. The dude can coach offensive line.
And that was really one of the I should say, that was one of the reasons I was confident or excited in this Alik Terry hire, is because I'm pretty sure that Cavanaugh was hired before or kind of alongside Terry timing wise. And that was one of the reasons that you were optimistic and I was optimistic that it was going to work out, because you had a really good veteran coach that was right alongside him and able to kind of show him the ropes a bit more. But let's also say, like, Alik Terry had his own room at Hawaii. It's not like this is his first offensive line coaching job. And of course, Hawaii is in Oregon, but having your own room isn't something to be scoffed at. So things have been going really well for Oregon. Obviously didn't go super well with the offensive line against Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, but all you can do is go back to the drawing board and try to get right for next season. And maybe with the addition of Pregnon, the third transfer portal guy, you're taking some of the pressure off of the 2025 class with the offensive line guys you got there. And I don't think that there were necessarily a lot of guys that you or I, Justin, expected to see on the field early. You got a guy like a Doug Utu or Zaire Addison. Those are kind of the upper level guys. Zach Siskowski from the state of Oregon, out of the Portland area. Those were some of the higher level commitments, but I don't think that you really had super high expectations for those guys to get on the field early. So it's a lot of give and take, right? You get a lot of transfers. You're not going to see some of these young guys, but also you're going to be able to have some of these transfers take these young guys under their wing and show them the way that the game is played and how to kind of navigate college football in 2025. So I think that that's kind of an under-discussed point maybe with some of the positives that come with getting these guys. So you're going to have people that are happy. You're going to have people that are upset, but it's very clear that having a balance of the portal and the high school guys are what's going to get it done. And that's what Oregon has had, right? With Harper, Poncho, and Connerly these past couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, dating back before Dan Lanning's arrival, when Mario Cristobal was here, Oregon had some misses on the offensive line in those later classes with Mario. Then, of course, you had JPJ, which was a huge hit, but he was 3 and out, right? So he was gone. And that's the case. You're seeing these guys that are, the hard part is offensive line in particular, along with defensive line, is a very much a developmental position. And so it's hard, right? Developmental means that, more than likely, 95% of the offensive linemen signed out there aren't going to be ready to come in and start or heavily contribute in their first year at whatever program they're at, right? It's pretty rare. Doesn't happen a ton. At least not at the major Power 4 level when you're competing for conference championships and playoff wins. And, that's where Oregon's at. So you've got a developmental position, yet if you get somebody that's really good, they're usually not here for more than 3 years, right? Cam Williams is another example at Texas, 3 and out at Texas.
Former Oregon commit, don't forget.
Yeah, Josh Connerly at Oregon, 3 and out because he came in and played heavily his first year, started the next 2 years, and he's out. It's tough. It's a really tough balance because if you get somebody good enough, they're not necessarily needing to be developed. They're out in 2 or 3, on 3 years. And so it's a really tough position, I think, more than ever. I know quarterback to me isn't tough. Like, maybe having some depth in your quarterback room is tough. But getting a starter at quarterback at any school isn't tough anymore. You either go and get a 5-star and have them for a year or two possibly, or you just hit the transfer portal because there's a plethora of quarterbacks in this. Yeah, you're going to have to pay for one, but you can get one. And that's the thing. Offensive line, if you go look at it, how many really good offensive line transfers were there in the portal this year? Not many. 6, 7,
not in
8.
abundance, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's 6, 7, 8 that everybody's vying for. That's why these guys, offensive line guys, are getting top dollar. And Oregon got, I would say, I'll argue this. Oregon got 2 guys that a lot of schools wanted in Isaiah World and Pregnon. And they got Alex Harkey, who I think is going to be a really good player. Maybe not quite as high profile as those guys, but still probably a top 15, offensive lineman in the transfer portal. I don't care what the rankings say. I kind of just go off what I hear from coaches and
Sure.
see, what their offer list looks like. So, to do that's pretty remarkable. And, offensive line's really tough. Because like I said, if you have a couple misses in classes, which was maybe like Alec Terry's early years at Oregon combined with the residue of Mario Cristobal, I think you and I agree this last 2025 class is pretty good coming in, but those are freshmen. So Utu could contribute. Zaire Addison could contribute. But before that, it was a lot of developmental guys, and we're still kind of waiting to see if most of those guys, kick it into gear. So we'll just have to see if they can now get to a point where they can recruit 2026 really well. I think they'll be able to start relying on offensive line transfers a little bit less moving forward, but they still weren't there yet.
A big addition, no doubt. And I think we should stay in the trenches, Justin, to talk about our next story here on the pod. Max Torres and Justin Hopkins here with ScoopDuck on 3. Glad to have you guys here for another episode of the pod. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Just because the offseason doesn't mean it's slow. That is for darn sure. Justin and I can definitely tell you that. So make sure you guys are tuned in with us on ScoopDuck.com. Try us out for just $1. You won't find better coverage anywhere. So staying in the trenches, Justin, Jamari Caldwell, Oregon defensive lineman, makes the call. Caldwell makes the call. That should be a headline for the 2025 NFL draft. And you told our Scoop Duck readers that this was probably going to be the case, but I'm sure there were still some people out there that were holding out hope that he'd come back for another year, especially with that NCAA waiver coming out that would grant former junior college players a full 4 years of Division I eligibility. We know, of course, that he spent time at Houston before getting out to Eugene, but alas, he is heading to the NFL, and he's played his last down as a Duck. So what was your reaction to this news, and what do you think it means for Oregon?
I think it was reasonably expected. I think that he entered this season transferring to Oregon, hoping he could, use that 1 year and up his profile and land on an NFL team. And I really don't doubt that he won't land on an NFL team. It'll just be a matter of when he's drafted. I mean, guys like him, defensive line, that's a developmental position in the NFL, and those guys will have a little more value. So I just think that, for Oregon, it was going to be really tough to kind of overcome that. I think that was his line of thinking when he headed to Oregon. I think he had a good but not great year at Oregon, showed some flashes. I think from a consistency standpoint, it's probably where he needs to improve the most. But I think there's an NFL player there. So I wasn't truly surprised. I know that this was probably one of the few guys that Oregon would like to have had back. I don't think it would qualify as a must get back, but would like to have had back. And again, everything's got a value, right? Every player has a value, right? If they're good enough, you'll overpay. Or if you think they're good enough, you'll overpay. If you're that short on a position, and you've got this guy available to you, you're gonna make a generous offer to try and keep him. I think if you're looking at Oregon, they would say, yeah, we'd love to get Caldwell back, but we also feel pretty good about Tion Gray and Terrence Green and Amari Washington and Barry Alexander coming in. We've got some pretty good interior guys on defensive line. If there's value here, we'll keep them, and if not, best of luck to you. So I think that's kind of where the ultimately where things came together. And I do think Caldwell had his eye on the NFL all along. So not a big surprise in the end. And I think you wish him the best of luck for sure.
And much like we're talking about here with Caldwell, had a brain fart there for a second. Like there's transfer portal guys that have come to Oregon in the past where they're kind of luxury additions. And if Caldwell were to come back to Oregon, I think that's exactly how I would have viewed it. A luxury addition. You get a starter back who knows your defense, who's played for Dan Lanning and Tony Tuioti for a year, but he's heading to the NFL, and Duck fans will hope that he gets drafted. And there's a lot of really exciting young names in that room, some of which have already seen the field, right? You look at an Amari Washington being the probably the most prominent one. Tion Gray, I think, is another one that people are really excited about. I saw him in person at the Rose Bowl, and that is just a ginormous human being. Aiden Breland got on the field in the Rose Bowl, so not sure what's in store for him in a bigger role in 2025. So you have pieces there to ultimately address a departure like this, and it's part of what makes college football fun is seeing who's next, whether that's a transfer portal guy or a high school guy. But yeah, I think that Caldwell had a pretty solid year at Oregon. Nothing crazy special, like not like a Derek Harmon type of impact. But also, I don't say that to minimize what he was able to do, because if there's one position that doesn't get enough credit aside from offensive line, it's probably the defensive lines. Those guys like a Jamari Caldwell who are out there soaking up and absorbing the double teams so that the linebackers can come flying in. So I think he kind of did his job and was as effective as the staff probably expected him to be when they recruited him from Houston. And you wish him all the best.
Yep. No, I agree. He was an integral part of that rotation. Like you said, wasn't a Derek Harmon piece. Derek Harmon did come in with a little bit loftier expectations and certainly lived up to them. But appreciate Harmon. I know he elevated that room and really made it so that guys like Tion Gray and Amari Washington and Aiden Breland and those guys could, continue to develop and learn from the older guys like him and Derek Harmon and others. So
there you go. There you go. Well, one last line that we can throw in here, story, I should say, topic. We have a pair of pro ducks that are up for Rookie of the Year. That, of course, being Tampa Bay Buccaneers running back Bucky Irving. Bucky on the Bucks. It just made too much sense for that not to happen. And then Bo Nix on the Broncos. Of course, the highlight from last week being the Bo Nix to Troy Franklin touchdown, which was nearly the only sign of life in that Broncos playoff game. But that was fun to see. What do you think about the rookie years that those two guys have had?
Yeah, obviously love it for both. And I think I really love it for Bo. Just, kind of shaking all that narrative off of, being a check down guy at Oregon. And, he came from Auburn being labeled as a bust, a quote unquote bust. Obviously shattered, records at Oregon while he was there. And then to go in to the NFL and just have a successful year, a successful season, obviously helped turn the Broncos around. And you think about it, that's a guy that came in, behind a Russell Wilson basically, and really kind of resurrected them a little bit, of course, with Sean Payton and others. But just great year for him. Obviously kind of cool that maybe, not maybe, but his last touchdown of the season went to Troy Franklin. Pretty cool. And not to minimize what Bucky did either, because Bucky went down there and basically stole that starting role from Rachaad White, whom everybody expected was going to be the guy at Tampa, and Bucky would just kind of be there and back him up. And he flipped that on its head and basically took over the job and really just, man, some of his runs, looked exactly like they did at Oregon, just at the NFL level. So I think you got two worthy candidates there. I do think Jaden Daniels is probably going to end up winning it. Just, they're in the playoffs, they're moving, things are happening. Jaden Daniels had a great year too. I'm not going to take it away from him. But, I guess more than anything, I'm just glad to see it wasn't Michael Penix in the end.
There you go. There you go. And I'll just add this little tidbit to carry us out. As much as I hate to admit it, I probably didn't start Bucky Irving early enough or soon enough on my fantasy team, and I lost my league. So that's what I get, I guess, for not betting on Bucky, because that dude's a beast, and I love watching him run. It was fun to watch him run at Oregon, and it's fun to watch him run at the highest level. More pro ducks having some success in the NFL, but I think that's pretty much what we have for you guys today here on the Duck Stage podcast. If you want to find more of Justin, you can follow him on Twitter/X at JHopkinsSD. You can find more of me on any social media platform at MTorresSports. Do us a favor, subscribe to the ScoopDuck On3 YouTube channel. And also subscribe to ScoopDuck.com. We also have a newsletter, free to sign up. You get the latest breaking news right there in your inbox. And you can join thousands of other Duck fans that are doing the very same thing. And then share the show. That's all I ask. But until next time, thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast.